I'm Sarah Whittaker, and at 29, I stumbled into a family secret so dark, it shattered everything I knew. Now hold fast, for this tale from Savannah's gilded shadows will curl your toes and set your heart racing. Picture me, a schoolmarm of modest means, wed to David Harrington, a fine man, with a family richer than Midas and twice as proud. I teach the young'uns their letters and psalms, pouring my soul into their bright futures. But 3 summers passed, in the year of our Lord 2022, I found myself ensnared in a plot so wicked it'd make the devil blush. My in-laws, the Harringtons, grand folks of Savannah's old money, up and declared they were off to the Bahamas for a week's frolic. Left in their wake was their granddaughter Sophie, a girl of 8, mute and bedridden, or so they claimed, with a sickness that kept her still as a statue. They begged me, nay, demanded, I tend to her in their sprawling mansion, a place so grand it could swallow a dozen of my little cottages whole. I ain't one for shirking duty, but my heart misgave me. Teaching's my calling, and my classroom ain't no place to abandon midterm. Yet the Harringtons, with their silver tongues and golden purses, bent the world to their will. David, my husband, bless his heart, has a spine softer than a marsh reed when his kin come calling. So there I was, packed off to their estate, with Sophie's care thrust upon me like a sack of meal. Little did I know, within hours of their departure, that child would upend my world with 7 words that struck like lightning. Now, folks, if this tale grips you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more yarn spun fresh from life's wild loom. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. Savannah, Seattle, or somewhere betwixt. But brace yourselves, for what follows is a storm of secrets, lies, and a brave little girl who'd been silent too long. I reckon I ain't the first to feel a stranger in my own kin's house. The Harringtons, they're a breed apart. Charles, the patriarch, a real estate baron with a glare to curdle milk. Margaret, his wife, all smiles and ice, running a charity that folks whispered was more show than substance. Caroline, their daughter, Sophie's ma, living off trust funds and charm. And Thomas, their eldest, a lawyer who'd sooner spit than speak to me. David, my David, he's the youngest, forever chasing his family's nod, while I, with my school teacher's wage and plain ways, was not but a speck of dust in their polished world. The day we settled into that mansion, I felt the weight of their eyes, even gone as they were. Sophie, poor lamb, sat in her wheelchair, staring blank as a new slate. Her eyes, though, Lord, they held a spark I couldn't shake, like a lantern hid under a bushel. I'd been told she was born frail, never to speak nor walk, and I believed it, fool that I was. But as I stood in that cavernous hall, with only Sophie and the echoes for company, I felt a prickle, like the air before a storm. Something was amiss, and fate was about to deal me a hand I never saw coming. The Harringtons' mansion in Savannah stood like a monument to their pride, all columns and chandeliers, but cold as a banker's heart. I wandered its halls, feeling less a guest than a trespasser, my schoolteacher's shoes scuffing floors polished to a mirror's gleam. Teaching's my life's blood, you see. In my classroom, I'm queen, shaping young minds like clay on a potter's wheel. But step into the Harringtons' world, and I was not but a speck, my middle-class roots a stain they'd sooner scrub out. David, my husband, God love him, tried to bridge the gap, but his kin had a way of making you feel small. Charles Harrington, the patriarch, was a man carved from granite, his real estate empire built on deals sharp as a razor. His word was law, and his glance could shrink you to a shadow. Margaret, his lady, was all Southern grace, her charity galas the talk of Savannah, The whispers hinted the funds didn't always reach the needy. Her smiles were daggers wrapped in silk, and she'd remark on my plain dresses with a pity that burned. Then there was Caroline, Sophie's ma, a woman of 35 who floated through life on trust funds and beauty. She'd birthed Sophie with a man long vanished and treated the girl like a trinket to be dusted off for show. Thomas, the eldest son, was a lawyer with his father's cold eye, scarce acknowledging me lest it tarnish his shine. David, my David, was the soft one, forever bending to his family's will, leaving me to bite my tongue at their slights. Every visit was a trial, their talk of my quaint cooking or noble career cutting deeper than I'd admit. Savannah's elite circles buzzed with the Harringtons' name, their charity events drawing crowds eager to bask in their glow. Margaret's pet project, a fund for afflicted children, like Sophie, was her crown jewel, though I'd begun to wonder if it was all stagecraft. The family's wealth was vast, yet their greed for control seemed vaster still. I'd seen how they maneuvered, bending school boards and donors to their whims, and I knew my place was to nod and smile, lest I stir a hornet's nest. Yet Sophie, that quiet child, lingered in my mind. At family gatherings, she'd sit in her wheelchair, eyes sharp as a hawk's, though the Harringtons swore she was lost to the world. I'd felt a kinship with her, a foolish notion I'd dismissed as sentiment. But as I settled into that mansion, tasked with her care, those eyes haunted me, whispering truths I wasn't yet ready to hear. The Harringtons had left me alone with their secrets, and the air was thick with the promise of revelation. I had no inkling then of the storm brewing, but my heart, like a weather vane, swung toward unease. The family's haste to flee, their insistence on my staying, felt less like trust and more like a trap. Charles had barked orders, Margaret had cooed assurances, and Caroline had barely glanced at Sophie as she packed her silks. David, swept along by their tide, had left me with a kiss and a plea to make it work. So there I stood, in a house too grand for comfort, with a child they called broken, and a suspicion that the Harringtons' polished facade hid rot beneath. The Harringtons' departure was a spectacle, like a circus packing up for greener pastures, their town cars loaded with trunks fit for royalty. I stood in their Savannah mansion, Sophie by the window in her wheelchair, her face blank as a new canvas, while her kin scarce spared her a glance. Sophie, Caroline's girl, was a mystery wrapped in sorrow. 8 years old, they said, born with a sickness that stole her voice and tethered her to that chair. The family spun a tale of specialists and hopeless cases, their sighs heavy with practiced grief. Margaret, ever the martyr, paraded Sophie at her charity galas, raising funds for poor souls like her, though I'd begun to wonder where those dollars wandered. Caroline, her mother, treated the child like a prop, fussing over her only when eyes were upon her. I'd seen Sophie at gatherings, still as a statue, yet her gaze held a fire that stirred my heart, though I chalked it up to a teacher's fancy. 3 days afore their Bahamas jaunt, Margaret rang me up, her voice smooth as molasses but firm as iron. She didn't ask, mind you, but declared I'd be Sophie's keeper while they sunned themselves abroad. "Family tends to family, Sarah," she said, as if I had a choice. My classroom, my pupils, those were my world, and leaving them midterm cut me deep. I protested, citing my duties, but Charles, with his checkbook and clout, had the school superintendent in his pocket. David, my soft-hearted fool, had already bowed to their will, promising me the guest suite was practically a palace.
I yielded, not for love of their grandeur, but to keep peace in a marriage already strained by their shadow. The day before they left, Caroline breezed through Sophie's care, tossing me a binder thick as a Bible. Medications thrice daily, feeding tubes, don't miss a dose, she snapped, her eyes on her Bahamas wardrobe, not her child. When I pressed what difficult meant if doses were skipped, she waved me off, muttering, "It was all in there." Charles loomed in, his voice a thunderclap. "This is a grave responsibility, Sarah. Don't fail us." His words landed like a judge's gavel, and I felt the weight of their trust, or their trap. As their cars rolled away, David among them, bound for some business nonsense in Nassau, I stood in that echoing foyer, Sophie's chair beside me. The mansion felt like a tomb, its opulence mocking my unease. I spoke to Sophie, soft-like, explaining I'd fix her supper, though I expected no reply. Her eyes followed me, sharp and searching, and I couldn't shake the notion that she saw more than they claimed. The binder's pages, the pills, the charity's glow, it all felt too neat, too staged.
I was a schoolmarm, not a nurse, yet here I was, bound to a child I barely knew, in a house that whispered secrets with every creak. The Harringtons' kitchen gleamed like a cathedral of wealth, all marble and steel, fit for a feast but silent as a grave. I stirred a pot of soup for myself, Sophie's nutritional shake prepped per the binder's decree, my mind adrift in the strangeness of my charge. I'd willed Sophie to the living room, set her before a children's program as instructed, and spoke to her gentle-like, explaining my tasks, though I reckoned it folly. Her blank stare followed me, yet those eyes, Lord, they held a wisdom I couldn't fathom. As I tended the stove, a chill crept up my neck, like a ghost's whisper in a storm. I turned, expecting some servant I'd not met, but the sight before me near stopped my heart. There stood Sophie, upright on her own two legs, one hand braced on the door frame, her frame trembling but defiant. My spoon clattered to the floor, and I gripped the counter to keep from falling. "Sophie," I breathed, scarce believing my eyes. Then she spoke, her voice soft as a summer breeze, with a child's faint lisp but clear as a bell. "They're stealing my money and lying to everyone." The room spun like a carousel gone mad. I stared at this girl, deemed mute and broken, now standing and accusing her kin of treachery. Her eyes, brimming with fear and fire, pleaded for trust. "They want my $4 million, she went on, "and they talk about sending me to a hospital forever. Please, you gotta help me." My knees buckled, but I knelt to her level, keeping my distance lest I scare her. "Sophie, child, what's this about? Who's doing this to you?" Her face crumpled, tears welling as she named them, her ma, Caroline, her grandpa, Charles, her grandma, Margaret. They fed her pills, she said, to keep her weak, to fool the world she was sick, all to claim a trust fund left by her other kin, the Blackwells, who died in a wreck when she was but 3. Worse, she'd heard whispers of a charity, Margaret's Pride, that was naught but a front to siphon money, with Sophie as its pitiable mascot. I led her to a chair, the soup forgotten, and listened as she poured out her tale. She learned to listen sharp, trapped in that chair, catching their plans to lock her away in some institution when she neared 18, ensuring their grip on her millions. The notion was monstrous, yet her clarity, her fear rang true. I looked into those eyes, no longer blank but blazing, and knew I'd stumbled into a den of vipers. The Harringtons' fine manners hid a greed black as pitch, and Sophie, this brave, broken child, was their prisoner. In that moment, my heart swore at oath, come hell or high water, I'd see her free. The Savannah dawn crept through the mansion's tall windows, casting shadows that seemed to whisper of the Harringtons' deceit. Sophie and I, bound by her shattering truth, set to unraveling the web they'd spun, our steps cautious as thieves in a king's treasury. The house was a labyrinth of secrets, its opulence a mask for darker doings. Sophie, her small frame steadier now, led me through its halls, her knowledge of its nooks uncanny for one so young. She'd spent years, she said, watching from her wheelchair, her mind sharp while her body played the part of a broken doll. Her ma's office, she whispered, held the keys to their scheme. And there we ventured, hearts pounding like drums at a hanging. Under a potted fern, just as she'd said, lay a key, glinting like a traitor's promise. The filing cabinet yielded to it, and within was a trove to make an honest soul weep. Paper spilled forth, bank statements, trust agreements, all bearing the Blackwell name, Sophie's kin who'd left her $4 million to claim at 18. But mingled with these were records of Margaret's charity, sums vast and wandering, funneled to accounts that stank of laundering. Most damning were medical files, penned by doctors with more greed than grace, claiming Sophie's sickness from birth, though her early years showed a child hale and hearty. My blood ran cold as I read prescriptions for sedatives, drugs to sap a girl's strength and cloud her mind, all to keep her their captive. Sophie, with a pride that near broke my heart, fetched her journal from beneath her mattress, a secret tome of neat script. She taught herself letters, piecing them from books left careless by her ma. Her words chronicled years of threats, Caroline's pinches, Charles's growled warnings, and plans to lock her in an institution, a place, she wrote, where kids vanish. Tucked among her pages were stolen papers, a charity ledger showing millions mislaid, and a letter plotting Sophie's fate, signed by Charles himself. The mansion's walls, I learned, were eyes, cameras hid in corners, watching Sophie's every breath, a prison guard in wires and lenses. We moved swift, photographing each page, my hands trembling with rage and purpose. Sophie's room, stark as a cell, held more horrors, a birth record pristine, showing a healthy babe, and a tattered note from her Blackwell grandpa, promising her wealth if she'd only reach 25 free of her captor's chains. Each find was a nail in the Harringtons' coffin, yet the weight of their power loomed. They were no mere greedy kin, but a syndicate, their charity a front for crimes deeper than I dreamed. As noon's light burned, I swore to Sophie, her eyes wide with hope, that these papers would be their undoing, though the path ahead was fraught with peril. The morning sun bathed Savannah in gold, but within the Harringtons' mansion, a storm brewed in my soul. Sophie's words, her frail courage had lit a fire, and I faced a choice that haunt a saint, to trust her tale and halt her pills, or follow the binder's cold commands. I stood over the kitchen sink, the morning's dose in hand, powders to dull a child's spirit, labeled as medicine but reeking of poison. Sophie watched, her eyes pleading, and my heart rebelled. If she spoke true, these drugs were her chains. If she erred, I risked her health. My gut, honed by years teaching youngins, whispered she was no liar. I tipped the dose down the drain, the water swallowing it like a secret. By noon, Sophie bloomed, her steps surer, her voice clearer, like a bird loosed from its cage. She laughed, a sound so pure it near broke me, and I knew I'd chosen right. Yet doubt gnawed, and I needed counsel. I slipped to the patio, away from the mansion's prying cameras, and rang Rachel Dawson, my old college chum, a lawyer fierce in defense of the helpless. I poured out Sophie's tale, the trust, the charity's dark dealings, the threat of a hospital where spirits were snuffed. Rachel's breath caught, her voice grave. "Sarah, this is a viper's nest. I've heard whispers of that charity, a whistleblower's report claiming it's a front for laundering, maybe tied to mob folk. Document all you find, but tread light. The Harringtons play for keeps." Her words chilled me, yet steeled my resolve. Back inside, Sophie and I plotted, our talks hushed in corners the cameras couldn't see. We'd gather more proof, secure it beyond their reach. But the question of David, my husband, hung heavy. I loved him, soft soul that he was, but his loyalty to his kin ran deep. That night, with Sophie abed, I called him in Nassau, my voice light as a summer breeze. David, I've found papers. Sophie's trust, that charity, it don't add up. His pause was a canyon. His reply cold as a banker's handshake. Sarah, leave it be. Caroline knows her child, and those funds ain't your concern. You're stirring trouble where there's none. His words cut deeper than a blade, hinting he knew more than he let on. Was he blind or complicit in this sin? I lied, soothing him with promises to obey, but my heart hardened. The Harrington's web was wide, and David, witting or not, was tangled in it. Sophie's freedom, her very life, rested on me alone. As I tucked her in, her eyes bright with trust, I swore I'd not falter, though the path grew darker with every step. The days in that Savannah mansion passed like a thief's vigil, each hour a dance with danger as Sophie and I wove our net to trap the Harringtons' lies. The house, grand as a duke's palace, was a maze of eyes, its cameras watching like hawks. But we found its blind spots and made them our sanctuary. Sophie, freed from her poisons, grew brighter, her spirit of flame no longer smothered. I taught her to ride a bicycle in the garden, her laughter ringing where silence once reigned, her wobbly path a symbol of freedom hard won. We baked Pete's pies, the kitchen warm with sense of home, and she'd grin, flour-dusted, as if tasting childhood for the first time. These moments, sweet as they were, sharpened my resolve, for they showed what her kin had stolen, a girl's right to run, to dream, to live unyoked. By day, we hunted evidence, stealthy as foxes. Sophie knew the mansion's pulse, guiding me to Caroline's office, where papers lay like confessions. We copied ledgers showing the charity's millions, siphoned to accounts tied to names Rachel later whispered were mogged up. Medical records, forged to paint Sophie as broken, piled beside emails plotting her institutional doom. Each find was snapped and sent to Rachel's cloud, a vault beyond the Harringtons' reach. Sophie's journal, her secret chronicle, grew thicker, its pages a child's indictment of years spent caged by greed. Rachel, bless her, was a whirlwind, digging into laws on trusts and abuse, warning me of the Harringtons' darker allies. Charles has friends in low places, she said, men who'd silence a threat for a price. Her words hung like storm clouds, but we pressed on, hiding our talks in the garden or the attic where no lens could spy. I taught Sophie to speak her truth clear, should the law ever call, and she practiced with a courage that shamed my fears. She'd trace the bike's handlebars, dreaming of school, of friends, and my heart ached for the years she'd lost. Nightly, the Harringtons called, their voices smooth as oil, checking Sophie's care. I played the dutiful fool, reporting her doses given, though the sink drank them all. Their trust was my shield, but it frayed with each lie. Sophie's transformation, her clear eyes, her steady gait, was a secret too big to hide forever. As the week's end loomed, I felt the noose tightening, the Harringtons' return a specter. We'd built a case to fell giants, but their wealth, their mobbed shadows loomed larger. Yet looking at Sophie, her hope a beacon, I knew we'd fight, come what may, for her freedom was worth any storm. The night was black as pitch when the Harringtons stole back to their Savannah lair, their return a thief's tread hours before the dawn they'd promised. I woke to the creak of the front door, my heart a drum, as voices echoed in the foyer, shattering our fragile plans. I flew to Sophie's room, finding her awake, eyes wide with dread, her small frame trembling. "They're Early, she whispered, fear lacing her words like poison. We hurried her to her official chamber, the one rigged with their spying lenses, and I tucked her in, urging her to play her old part. Hold fast, child, I murmured. We'll face this together. Barely had I settled her when Caroline swept in, travel-worn but sharp-eyed, her gaze raking me like a hawk's. I spun a tale of checking noises, my voice steady though my pulse raced. She nodded, satisfied for the moment, and joined her kin below, leaving me to follow, Sophie's hand squeezing mine in silent trust. The living room was a court of wolves, the Harringtons assembled, despite the hour.
Charles sat like a king, Margaret poised beside him. Thomas pacing, and David, my David, stood apart, his eyes dodging mine. They questioned me, their words cloaked in civility, but edged with suspicion. Margaret noted pills unaccounted for, her tone a velvet blade. I parried, blaming a miscount, but the air thickened, their doubts a gathering storm. Then came a sound to freeze the blood, footsteps on the stair. Sophie appeared, no longer the broken doll, but a girl upright, clad in her Sunday best, her voice clear as a church bell. I'm not sick, Ma. I know about the money and your lies. The room roared to life, a tempest of shouts and curses. Caroline lunged for Sophie, her face a mask of rage. But I stepped between, my heart a shield. Charles thundered accusations, claiming I'd bewitched the child, while Margaret clutched her pearls, feigning shock. I held my ground, my voice rising like a preacher's. You've drugged her, lied to the world, stolen her millions, and run a charity that's not but a thief's front. I listed their sins, forged records, laundered funds, plans to cage Sophie in an institution, each word a hammer blow, their faces paling with every strike. As Caroline reached for a pill bottle, snarling for Sophie to take it, the doorbell chimed, a clarion in the chaos. Rachel stood there, flanked by police, a CPS worker, and a man introduced as a whistleblower, his ledger proving the charity's fraud. Caroline, cornered, broke like a dam, sobbing that Charles had masterminded it all, his mob ties forcing her hand to save their crumbling empire. The officer's eyes hardened, and as they moved to question Charles, I saw David's face crumple, the truth dawning at last. The Harringtons' kingdom was falling, and Sophie, brave Sophie, stood tall, her truth the spark that lit their ruin. The Savannah sun rose gentle on a world turned upside down, its light a balm after the night's storm. Sophie, freed from her chains, stepped into a new dawn, while the Harringtons' empire crumbled under the weight of their own deceit. At the hospital, doctors poked and prodded, their verdict a hymn of truth. Sophie was sound as a bell, her mind sharp, her body mending swift from years of poisoned pills. No trace of the sickness they'd sworn by, only gaps from isolation, soon to be filled with a child's rightful joys. I sat by her side, David beside me, his face etched with a sorrow newborn. He'd seen the evidence, papers, ledgers, Sophie's own words, and the scales had fallen from his eyes. I was blind, he whispered, and I nodded, gentle but firm, for his ignorance had been a choice, though his heart now bent toward right. The law moved swift, like a river in flood. Charles and Caroline faced a litany of charges: child abuse, fraud, money laundering, their charity a front for mobbed-up schemes. Caroline, ever the turncoat, spilled her father's secrets for a lighter sentence, weeping of mob threats that bound her to his will.
Charles, unbowed, tried to buy his way free, but his bribes only tightened the noose, adding corruption to his ledger. Margaret escaped the jailer's grasp, but her name, once Savannah's pride, was mud, her galas shunned. Thomas, claiming ignorance, saw his lawyering days dim, his firm casting him adrift. David and I took Sophie as our own, a court's blessing sealing her place with us. Our marriage, bruised by his early doubts, mended slow in counseling's care, but his devotion to Sophie was a cornerstone we built upon. We left the mansion's ghosts for a modest home, its yard alive with Sophie's laughter as she ran with schoolmates, her nightmares fading like mist. School welcomed her, a private academy versed in healing broken starts, and she bloomed, her mind hungry, her friends a daily delight. Her trust, now guarded by an honest trustee, promised a future secure, with millions more to come at 25, a legacy her black whales meant for her alone. Inspired by her courage, Rachel and I birthed a foundation to root out charity frauds and free children caged by greed, its mission a beacon for souls like Sophie. That evening, as Sophie played under Savannah's oaks, her joy a song after years of silence, I saw the arc of her salvation. She'd been a shadow, her voice stolen, but now she shone, a testament to truth's power. The road ahead held trials, courts, therapies, the scars of betrayal, but Sophie's hand in mine, her trust a treasure, made every step a victory. She'd reclaimed her childhood, and I, a schoolmarm turned crusader, had found my calling anew. Now, folks, gather close, for this tale of Savannah's shadows ain't just a yarn to pass the evening. It's a mirror held to the heart, asking what you do when truth whispers and the mighty stand against it. I'm Sarah Whitaker, and Sophie's story, that brave child's climb from silence to song, has left its mark on me, as I reckon it has on you. Picture that night in the Harringtons' mansion, when Sophie, a girl deemed broken, stood tall and spoke words that shattered a dynasty's lies. Her 7 words, "They're stealing my money and lying to everyone," were a spark in a powder keg, igniting a blaze of justice. But it weren't just her voice that turned the tide. It was the choice to listen, to believe a child's truth over a family's gold-plated deceit. I was but a schoolmarm, my world no bigger than a classroom, yet fate thrust me into a battle where courage was the only coin that mattered. And Sophie, Lord bless her, showed me that even the smallest among us can topple giants when heart and truth align. This ain't a tale that ends with the gavel's fall or the jailer's key. Sophie's laughter now fills our modest home. Her bicycle tracks crisscross the yard, and her school books pile high with dreams. But the scars of those years, the pills and threats, linger in her quiet moments, a reminder that freedom's price is vigilance. The Harringtons fall, Charles and Caroline bound for prison, that charity unmasked as a thief's front brought justice. But it's Sophie's rising that gives this story its soul. She's a beacon, proof that the quietest voice, when heard, can shake the earth. Now, I ask you, good people watching from your parlors or porches, what would you have done? Would you have faced a family like the Harringtons, their wealth a fortress, their mobbed allies a shadow at your back? Would you have trusted a child's whispered truth against a world shouting lies? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me your heart, whether you're in Savannah's moss-draped streets, Chicago's bustling heart, or some far-flung corner of this wide world. Your voice matters, for it's the chorus of honest folk that keeps stories like Sophie's alive. If this tale has stirred you, if Sophie's courage has lit a spark, then hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Our channel's a hearth for stories of truth and triumph, spun fresh each week for souls who know life's battles ain't won with gold,
but with grit. Share this video with kin and friends, for every view, every like carries Sophie's story farther, reaching those who might be trapped in their own silent prisons. Your support ain't just a click, it's a lifeline, a chance to shine light where darkness festers. I've learned through this storm that the world's full of Sophies, children, folks of all stripes whose voices are stifled by greed or fear. Rachel and I, with our foundation, aim to find them, to root out frauds masked as charity and free those caged by lies. But we ain't alone. You, watching now, are part of this fight. Share a story, lend a hand, or simply listen when a quiet voice speaks. Sometimes that's enough to change a life. The Harringtons thought their wealth made them untouchable, but they forgot the power of one heart standing firm, backed by others who dare to care. As I sit on our porch swing, Sophie's laughter drifting from the yard, I think on the road we've traveled. It weren't easy, nor is it over. Court dates noom and healing's a slow dance. But every step with Sophie, every day she claims her childhood, is a victory worth any toil. This tale, spun from a Savannah night, is a call to you. Be the one who listens, who stands when others bow. For in the end, it's the quietest voices, Sophie's, yours, mine, that sing the loudest songs of hope. So leave your mark below, subscribe to hear more, and share this story wide. Let's keep the light burning for Sophie, for truth, for all who need a champion. Thank you for lending your ears, and remember, the smallest spark can start a fire that changes everything.